Hey everyone, thanks for joining me in session 239 of Behavioral Observations. In this episode, I'm joined by Anika Costa and Dr. Paulie Gavoni, and we discuss their latest book, Quick Wins, Using Behavior Science to Accelerate and Sustain School Improvement. In our conversation, we talk about why they felt this book was necessary, who represents their ideal reader, and whether we ask too much of school leaders. We also talk about the distinction between leading and lagging indicators, viewing relationships as accomplishments, their quick walk protocol, and what things leaders should do before providing corrective feedback to staff members. I should also note that even if you're not in a school setting, a lot of what we talk about today will be applicable in the general realm of leadership and management. Paulie and Anika are presenting what sounds like a great talk at this year's Stone Soup conference. It's called Tough Talks, which, by the way, if you decide to attend Stone Soup, you can save on your registration by using the promo code PODCAST. And at the very end of the show, the three of us engaged in a little bit of shameless self-promotion by talking about the project we've been working on for almost 2 years. It's called the Behavioral Toolbox. It's essentially an e-learning site we built for school-based professionals who are interested in learning how to improve student behavior in educational settings. We just launched our first course. It's called Ready, Set, Consult. And we have many more in various stages of development. In fact, I'm about to film the second course in the next week. So I'm really excited to get this information out there and share it with folks in school-based settings. So we've done our best to, and to that end, we've done our best to make the content accessible. We've avoided jargon wherever we could, and we hope this is something that's helpful to those out there who are struggling to improve student behavior in those settings. But anyway, back again to this particular podcast. The Quick Wins book, again, is available wherever you buy books. I've got links to Amazon in the show notes, but you can pick it up just about anywhere. And if you do, I really hope you like it. So without any further delay, let's get to this fun conversation with Paulie and Anika.
Welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. Now here's your host, Matt Sikoria.
Anika Costa and Paulie Gavoni, welcome to the Behavioral Observations Podcast, or welcome back, I should say. How are you guys doing?
Hey, doing
good,
well.
brother. Good to see you again.
That's right. This is fun. It's like our normal Monday morning meeting time, so it's kind of funny doing the podcast under these circumstances. This could just be like one of our regular conversations. So we'll just have to make sure we don't
trash talk.
Yeah. No cursing here. This is a family show. So I know people listen to this with their kids on the way to work.
Yeah, that's all you, Paulie.
Oh, come on. I think all of us have. Anyway, we'll just leave that there for a minute. So we're here talking about the book that you guys just put out, Quick Wins, Using Behavior Science to Accelerate and Sustain School Improvement. You were nice enough to give me a copy of it, and I've kind of thumbed my way all the way through it and have some questions I want to ask you about. And I think this is going to be a really helpful resource for people in school settings. And more generally, it's, I think, a good example of, what we might call implementation science. We're not creating anything new here, but just applying what we know in settings that really, really need help. So all of that to say is that there's a lot to get into. But one of the things I always like to ask folks when they write books or undertake any type of whether it's a study or something else, is, what made you want to do it in the first place? So what made you want to write the book? This is the second edition. So, to the extent to which the second edition was warranted, what made that necessary? What sort of things were you guys seeing in your day-to-day work that said, hey, I need to put this piece of information out because we think it's going to help people?
Well, I think we can't talk about the second edition without at least discussing the first edition a little bit. You just have to, the reason for this is because organizational behavior management is like non-existent in education. I was working in a lot of schools that had school-wide positive behavior supports, and which can be great when implemented well, but it was finding a lot of people training who are trained in PBIS and not implementing it. And so I thought, well, we kind of need PBIS for adults. And somebody said, well, there is something like that. It's called organizational behavior management. And they handed me the book by Dr. Aubrey Daniels called Bringing Out the Best in People. And so I selfishly tried to just fix one hallway instead of fixing the whole school, because it was just too much to do. And with school with that many behavior challenges, and it had this like large impact across the whole school. It's like it gave me belief in myself. I didn't believe in myself. I did obviously believe in science. So I'm like, hey, I can do this. And other people thought they believed in me because they saw the changes happening. They believed in themselves that they can actually make behavior change. And we took it and we did it in different ways. And that's where the start of Quick Wins was. But Quick Wins was the first book. And, it was a very good book grounded in solid principles, but there were lots of errors in it. And Anika and I had done some trainings based on it. And Anika is an instructional designer. She thinks logically about it. She sees opportunities to make these books and the work that we do more ready for learning. And so I think that was really the impetus between doing it. The book had been out there for a while, and I just knew that it could be better. And so that's why I said, hey, Anika, why don't you jump in this with me? And she said, oh God, here we go again.
I didn't want to do it, but I will say that I read, I was handed the book, the first edition of Quick Wins, and it was handed to me at a time when I was really struggling in schools, and, kind of trying to find my way as a consultant. I had, my behavior analytic hat, my teacher hat, my educator hat, but I was missing some things. And so that was one of the first books that Paulie turned me on to help me guide me and, support some of the things that I was doing. Actually, take a look at systems and, putting all those pieces of the puzzle together.
Excellent. So who did you have in mind for the audience for this book? Who's the ideal reader? And so if you could, create a caricature, if you will, of the person who's going to get the most use out of this, who would that be?
Funny, I was just talking about this with my buddy Bruce Tenor this morning, and he's like, "Man, every new school leader that comes in should read this book." From a school perspective, educator perspective, and leadership perspective, because I've created leadership prep courses based on the standards that set up by states, and they're missing behavior science, of course, because we just have not done a great job doing it. So I think any school leader should read it. It doesn't matter, what they've read and what their leadership theory is, that they support transformational leadership, servant leadership, all this stuff. Great stuff. I love it. But the science is the DNA of leadership. And so when they understand scientific principles behind what they're doing and the outcomes they're producing, they can really become excellent in whatever approach they're using it. So that's number one. Number two, anybody that's working in any form of supporting the behavior of others, of improving performance, improving behavior in schools, they can use it. So, it could be a social worker, it could be a guidance counselor, definitely consultants, behavior analysts, absolutely, for behavior analysts, it's like, it was the initial breaking people out of the matrix. People only think about the use of the science when it comes to improving learner behavior, but we should always keep our behavioral lens on. And so it's a really nice and easy way for them to begin kind of conceptualizing what this might look like, improving behavior through improving the performance of others. That's what it's about, because we know that, almost always, if we're going to get sustainable improvement in student behavior, we have to improve the performance of the educators because we got to fade out, right? So I think that's the odds. Did I leave anything out on that, Anika?
No, I think you covered it. And, and really for behavior analysts, I think like the first book, Quick Responses, we wanted that common language. We wanted, behavior consultants who are working in schools. I think, this book is for them, very much like Quick Responses, in that, it helps them to understand how to find that common language and common ground with educators. Because I think that's a big piece that's often missing, when behavior analysts, work in schools and are supporting teachers and educators. But I think, you have those behavior analysts who, are leading or supporting teacher classroom leaders. And so I think this book is for them. I think it's for school administrators. But, like I said, Paulie, I think it's for, anyone that's, leading or supporting others.
When I was reading this book, I had maybe kind of a contrarian thought here that I wanted to throw at you guys.
Throw it, man. Bring it.
Well,
questions.
I see this in my travels and my practice as a school consultant a lot. And, so let's say you have a school principal, and this is someone who, like many principals, they start as teachers, taught for some period of time, and maybe got some advanced graduate work in school leadership and things like that. But, to your earlier points that, how to lead, how to manage, how to do performance management and skills like that, don't typically get taught in these programs. And so there's part of me that I'm wondering if our expectations are too high for people in these leadership positions. That, in other words, is it reasonable to assume that they can acquire these skills to learn how to pinpoint and performance manage and things along those lines? It's almost like trying to turn a school leader into some form of a behavior analyst, maybe not all the robust knowledge of concept and theory and principles and things like that, but nonetheless to do some high level analysis and implementation. And I'm wondering if that sometimes is too great of an ask, especially in the backdrop of all the other responsibilities. I'm getting the back to school emails from the principals in my neck of the woods, and they're worried about the flow of drop off and pickup, in the parking lot. They're trying to, there's a nationwide shortage of teachers and staff. So they're racing to cover classrooms, and so they have all these other administrative duties. And this seems almost like it's an add-on, if you will. So I don't know. Am I being too pessimistic here? Do I have a reasonable point of view, or what's been your response when you try to implement? I know you guys go all over the country and even internationally teaching this stuff. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, you're definitely being pessimistic about it, brother. It's
the
whole point of quick wins.
Yeah.
The whole point of that is to get them to engage in the leaders as well, something that requires little response effort, but produces a visible and valuable outcome. So it makes their job easier. It makes it a lot easier. It's funny you mentioned the drop off, right? That's one of the quick wins that we talk about. Exactly that point. That's very visible for people to see. And one of the schools that we were working at was like there was lines backed up. Kids were getting out and walking in front of the cars. The community was complaining, and they had been that way for like 20 years, man. This is an elementary school. And all we did was reverse the flow. And oh my God, man, you would have thought it was like a miracle. People just loved the principal. They were so happy because the kids were, behaving better, and it required very practical principles of OBM. We had to come up with a plan, a visual of what it looks like, man. We had to make sure teachers knew what to do and how to do it in their spot, but very simple things. And then once they saw it happening and working, they were bought in. They were bought into the principle. They were bought in that we can together collectively make these differences. And so there's no doubt about it that it makes the school leader's job easier in producing valued outcomes to them. But part of it is like finding out what's valuable to their stakeholders, right? It's not just about what's important to the school leader. Oftentimes they got to find out what's important to their stakeholders, because they need to get them to engage in some sort of a low response effort that's going to produce visible and valued outcomes.
Yeah. And I think, just to go back to what you had said about expectations, and, we should expect these school leaders, to be able to engage in these behaviors and know how to manage and lead. But it's so funny that I was doing a talk recently, and this very thing came up. Like, shouldn't administration, like, they should know how to do this? And I said, all right, let's process this. Let's think about this. And, would we say that about a teacher. Well, no, okay, well, we're supporting the teachers, but there's still sometimes that like expectation that they should know how to do this. They should know how to manage their classroom. They should know how to teach. They should know how to implement these systems and teach expectations and all of those things. But if we look at it, and we talk about this all the time, that, just like teachers and teacher prep programs are not being prepared to meet the demands of the classroom, school leaders either. And so, we have these expectations going in, sometimes as consultants or behavior analysts that they should know. But then I ask, well, should our learners know? So if we were working with a student and we're there to support them, should they know how to do something? No, we have to teach them. And so I think part of that is, again, like Paulie said, understanding what their values are, like understanding what their reinforcers are, what's important to them, what's going to make their job easier. And I think we have to take a look at school leaders in the same lens. Again, that behavioral myopia is real. And I think oftentimes too, it's helping the leader be a better observer of their behavior. I think that's the key component that oftentimes is overlooked.
And the impact of it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
See. So I one other question I had when came to me as I was going through the book is what are some indicators of a really well managed school? If you were to walk into, if someone just dropped you in the middle of I don't know who knows where, but some random community, and they say, hey, go to this school, and what are the sorts of things that you look for that are just obvious visual things that you can perhaps ascertain very quickly as to the capabilities of the personnel in that building that would suggest that, okay, these people are organized and they've got some systems working really well. What are those things what are those signposts that you look for in those settings? And you can also take it both ways. What are the what's the opposite of that? But I'm just curious, what are some, I guess, performance indicators that you would look for under those circumstances?
Yeah. Well, one of the first things I look at is presence. Like, who's present? You have teachers out? Do you see administration out? Do you see them greeting the kids in the morning? So if this was, early morning drop off, there is a clear, system in place for, arrivals. There's a clear, system for, so how students enter the building. Who's there? Are they smiling? Are they greeting the kids? Are they correcting misbehavior in a positive way? So I know Paulie always uses the example of, if a student is running and the expectation is that they walk in the hallway, that you ask them to stop, go back and walk. And then you thank them for walking and they go on their way. So all of those things, if you say hi to students, do they say hi back? There have been instances where we've been in schools, and I remember just very clearly, we were in a school and we were looking, it was a school that, didn't have those things where, you would say, oh, this is a positive environment. This is a positive culture, things like student work on the wall, there's, inspirational signs, the front office is, staff are greeting you, all of those things. But I remember like going into a school, and I think they were about first or second grade students, and they were lined up waiting for their teacher in the cafeteria after lunch. So they were waiting. And so, one of the things that we do is we go in and we say good morning and hello. And I said hi to this student, and, what did you have for lunch? Was it good? What's next? And so the student was looking at me, and she looked at me and with big eyes, and like, she didn't know how to respond. And then her friend was next to her, says, why is she talking to you? Does she know you? So that's an indicator of, what is the culture like? If students aren't used to the adults in the building talking with them, engaging with them. And so that's an indicator of, something that is, that probably needs to be, looked at in terms of culture of the school.
We actually have a process that does just that, Matt. It's called the quick walk. It's going around and looking for all these indicators, because the whole point of quick wins is finding something that, think about it instead of behavioral momentum as organizational behavioral momentum, right? whether it's in the classroom, a school level, even a district level. What's that low hanging fruit that's going to produce valuable outcome? Now, the valued outcomes got to be initially with the stakeholders. Like you go into a classroom, for example, and to support a teacher, you might be really wanting to get, this classroom under control, or, but the teacher might be just barely keeping their head above water. So what's that thing that's going to be most important to them? Because you need to get buy-in with them, and that establish you as a reinforcer. If you don't establish yourself as a reinforcer, if you come in there and you're making them do a whole bunch of stuff, to your point earlier, that requires higher response effort, they're not going to want you around. So you've got to get them to do something that's easy and produces some sort of valued outcome for them. And then you can start slowly shifting them to some other things. But you do that, and we talk about this in Quick Wins, by asking really good questions, finding out what the reinforcers are, finding out what's blocking their access to the reinforcers, et cetera, et cetera. You do it at the classroom level, you do it at the school level, and everything we're saying is no different than what you would do with a learner. Don't we want to find out what their preferences are, and find out, what behaviors they need to engage in that are going to maybe get them in touch with those things. So it's all really the same thing. We're just shining a light on it in a way that just makes some very practical sense. And, and then, of course, there's linking the behaviors, because with OBM, you have a performance chain, right? You can't look at just the learner of the behavior. You got to look at the learner of the teacher. You have to look at the learner of the school leader, up to district leadership. It's all interlocking behavior. And so, when you make these plans, sometimes you got to consider, right, what are the small changes that we're looking for and how are we going to measure it? Now, one of the things that you started this off with about leading and lagging indicators. So I want to zoom out for a second about that. Are you okay with me staying on this point, or?
Yeah. So just to kind of bring the audience along here, you do write about the concept of leading and lagging indicators. So tell us a little bit what those are and why those things are important, and then certainly continue with the
a leading indicator is more like a here and now, right? So imagine that you said you have a result that you want, and it's traveling. I like to use the GPS analogy, and that is we're going to come up there and see you, Matt. We're going to come to New Hampshire because we want to hang out with you.
You guys want to be cold?
No, I don't want to be cold.
Well, we'll come in the summer. So, a leading indicator would be like the mile markers that are passing by you. It's a here and now that let you know if you're moving the right direction, right? A lagging indicator would be like passing state lines. So you can look back and be like, all right, did we get to this place in the time frame that we want? Are we still on track, moving towards that result, going to New Hampshire, or are we way off base? And unfortunately, a lot of times people have these lagging indicators. They might call them sub goals. They're these things that are like down the line, and they're looking at this stuff weekly, monthly, quarterly, and it's important data to look at. But they're missing the leading indicator stuff, right? They're missing that here and now. We look for things like, as Anika mentioned, people being in the hallway, people greeting the kids, people correcting behavior in a way that's helpful, not harmful. We'll also look at things like how are the adults behaving around the school leaders, right? And how are the students obviously behaving around the teachers, the classroom leaders. This is very important. For example, if we go into the cafeteria, because we look at the common areas a lot with the Quick Wins, and we see teachers yelling at kids around the principal, and this becomes the norm, right? The culture is shared behavior. It's really shared behavior that's reinforced. So that would be an indicator that principal hasn't set the expectation and reinforced the behavior that's aligned with that stuff. This is just the way we do things around here. And so again, good people engage in, bad behavior because they don't know better. So that would be like a leading indicator, like, this is not moving in the right direction. Or, people are greeting the kids and, et cetera, et cetera. That's a leading indicator. If we zoom out like a little bit more, we say, we want to reduce suspensions. Suspensions are a result that we want to produce, right? A lagging indicator might be the number of referrals that occurred during the week, right? A leading indicator might be the number of calls for assistance to the classroom that are occurring. And so we got to unpack those things, right? We need to have this kind of behavioral roadmap. And we also want to have things like accomplishments. Like, let's say you come up with a plan. The plan is, because let's say you find out that through a good performance diagnostics that teachers have been trained in classroom management, right? So you have a plan, you're going to train them in classroom management, and this training is going to produce this outcome, right? We're going to train them and coach them. And so we need to have some sort of metric that lets you know you're moving that direction, because the suspension data is not going to move for a while. And a lot of school leaders are being judged on that result, but it takes time to hit that result. So when you create metrics through these accomplishments, it provides some sort of tangible path. For example, the accomplishment could be the number of, or it could be having a training schedule, right? Check that off the list, right? It could be the number of teachers that are now trained. It could be the number of teachers who now have a classroom management plan. Now, that doesn't mean that suspension result is going to move yet, but it does mean that there's being progress made towards that result. It could be the number of teachers who have taught expectations, the number of rules that are posted on the wall, the number of students who can state the expectations, the number of teachers who are in the hallway now greeting kids, et cetera, et cetera. And if you've pinpointed all the right behaviors, right, and you've achieved these accomplishments, you're going to be moving in that direction. So again, it's making that movement tangible, right? Salient. It gives this behavioral roadmap towards this desired result, reduction suspension. Does that make sense, Matt?
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I wanted to get into is I think when you kind of touched on what are the behavioral norms of staff in your previous example of the leader not correcting that, a teacher who is maybe redirecting a student in a way that's not optimal. Let's just leave it at that, I guess, in terms of how we might describe it. So I guess one of the things based on that, when a leader sees a staff member doing something that does require correction, so say the staff member's, doing something that needs to stop, or it's an error of omission. They should be doing something when they're not, like having a student go back and walk, etc.
And that's a big problem a lot.
Yeah. So what should that leader think about before just trying to correct that, walking up to the teacher and correcting that behavior? And if it's possible, I don't know if if there's a tie-in to the talk that you guys are doing at this year's Stone Soup conference about having tough talks. If you want to, if that's part of the context of this answer, feel free to kind of wrap that in there. Obviously, don't give away your talk, because we want people to sign up for the Stone Soup conference.
Stone Soup,
Stone Soup. Yes, I haven't finished my second cup of coffee yet. So anyway, long story short, when someone needs to provide correction to a staff member, what are some things folks should think about before just walking up to them and say, hey, I need you to do X instead of Y?
Well, I think they need to look at their own behavior. Have they done certain things? Does the person know what to do? And that would require, maybe some, minimal training or some training. Have they, told them what they need to do? And can they repeat back, yes, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is how I'm supposed to correct behavior. So it's all about asking questions. Do they know what they're supposed to do? So I think, that's something that a leader should consider, that, what have they done to ensure that the performer, the teacher in this case, is able to know what they're supposed to do, tell them what they're supposed to do, and have they been trained in it?
Yeah, I think that so what Anika's really referring to is like a performance diagnostics. If somebody's not performing to a standard, it's either a can't do or a don't do, right? Skill deficit versus performance deficit. If it's skill deficit, you have to make sure that they have the skills. So when you ask them, can you tell me, can you show me, let you know whether they can do it or not. The second part gets a little bit more complicated, right, in terms of a performance deficit. And that is sometimes people just are not in the habit of doing it. But a big thing and we have this in the book, the performance diagnostic checklist, and it's for educators, is like to Anika's point, reflecting on your own behavior. Now, how often is that person being observed? How often are they getting feedback? What kind of feedback are they getting? Is it positive feedback shaping the behavior? Is it mostly corrective? Are they able to see the outcome or the impact of their behavior on the result? Right. And the result in this case is student behavior. And do they value that outcome? Right. So is that getting them in touch with some sort of reinforcement? Or are we asking them to do too many things at once? So they should be engaging like zip, 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 some quick performance diagnostics to think about why. And if they've pinpointed the result that they're trying to achieve, right? Improved on-task behavior in the cafeteria, for example. If they've made sure that teachers and the staff there know exactly what to do, how to do it, and all those things, right? If they've set goals with them, very simple goals, hey, you're going to come in at this time. This is the area you're going to supervise, if they already have some sort of metric to say, we've been having to put kids on timeout this many times, or this many referrals comes out of there, right? And if they're being observed and getting that feedback and it's a good plan, it's going to work. We write about this, how to go about doing this in the book and in terms of our quick wins in action. But coming back to your simple point, you have to think about yourself, right? Why, right? That's the can't do or don't do. And to Anika's point, you have to ask good questions. You come right out telling people what to do. It can be very aversive, You ask them simple questions, hey, do you remember where you're supposed to be? You remember what you're supposed to do? Remember why you're supposed to be doing that? Is there anything I could do to help you with it? Those parts, right? But always reflecting on your own behavior as a leader, supervisor, whatever role that you're in.
I see. And is that something that you plan on elaborating on in your talk at the conference?
Oh, yeah. 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 There's simple, practical, tough talks. We call it a tough talk. But now there is we've gone through these simple coaching briefs, if you will, with somebody. And now we've really got to sit down because we're not seeing changes in performance. And so what do you do when you have to engage in those kind of behaviors?
Yeah, I would tell the story of my tough talk, my own personal experience with tough talks, but I'll save that for Stone Soup.
All right. Ooh, well done. Well done, Anika.
Oh, it's a good one too.
It's a good one.
Well, I think that's something that's going to resonate with most listeners, whether they're working in schools or not, because obviously as a behavior analyst, you're going to be in the business of directing the behavior of others for the most part, whether it's a paraprofessional school setting or a tech in a clinic, or, trying to influence the behavior of parents, in terms of parent training and things along those lines. So it sounds like that will be relevant for just about anyone who's interested or concerned with or charged with making behavioral change.
Can I make a note on about we were talking about culture and we were talking about leaders seeing staff, and what's one of the indicators that Nick and I look at is that how are staff, faculty and staff behaving around the leader. In Quick Wins, this was from the original, but still in this version of it, was actually in a cafeteria one time. I just never forget this. It just shows you the power of culture, right? And there was a lot of not great behavior going on part of students and part of the staff, right? The cafeteria was not going well, wasn't being managed very well. But there's one teacher in the middle of all this chaos. One teacher was praising the kids and helping them. And that line was just like, in the middle of this chaos, there was a straight line going on. And she was being really positive in her approaches, and it was amazing. So I said to my friend, he was a psychologist, Dave Kincaid, I said, hey, brother, because I was talking to a student or something like that. I'm like, do you see that going on? Go reinforce her, man. Go tell her we see this, because we were actually out there doing some observations. And he went over and told her that it was wonderful. And she broke down in tears, man. She broke down in tears. And you think about being in that kind of environment, and you're the only one, you probably think you're crazy, and like, why isn't this going on everywhere else? And it was sad. It was sad to see that going on. And it's very hard to maintain that behavior in that kind of culture, because you just kind of get pulled in, and probably people are judging you for it. Like, why are you being that way? This is the way you gotta show these kids how to be. And we see that, man, especially in high poverty schools where kids are being treated like they're in a detention center. Again, it's good people. They just end up assimilating to the culture there. And, then it just becomes the way that they do things around there. But it shouldn't be that way. They just, again, if they knew better, they would do better.
Yeah, they don't have the tools, and that's where we come in and support. And we help people, discover those tools, and we teach them those tools, and we help build capacity so that they can maintain those systems and those supports, within their own teams.
So there are going to be people listening to this who will be like, hey, I'm not in a leadership position. I don't have any authority. Therefore, how can I possibly implement this? What you guys are saying and recommending here sounds awesome, but there's no way I can I don't have the tools, I don't have the power, I don't have the again the authority to implement these sorts of things. What would you say to that staff member?
Well, I think they do have the tools. If you're a behavior analyst, and I'm just speak specifically about behavior analysts here, because I think this is again where we kind of we struggle. We struggle as a field, and especially when we go into schools. And again, looking through that behavior analytic lens, like you have the tools. Think about what you would do with a student learner, right? And so now apply that to an adult learner. You're not going to just go in and do things with a student, right? You're not going to walk in if you're, in home-based services, you're not just going to walk into somebody's home and start doing things, right? You're going to ask questions. You're going to pair. You're going to pair with the parent. You're going to pair with the learner. Well, it's the same when you go into a school and you go into a teacher's classroom. And one of the biggest reasons why, we as behavior analysts don't feel like we have that authority or we can't implement this because there's no buy-in. We hear that all the time. And then if we reflect back on and talk with, what that behavior analyst did when they first went into that classroom, it's like, oh, and help them see that looking through your behavior analytics, you have the tools. Do what you would do anyway. You would do this with the student. You would go in, you would pair with them, you would find out what their reinforcers are, you would ask questions or you would observe them, and you would assess. That's where the performance diagnostics come in, and you talk with them about, how do they feel about things? And building that relationship is something that is often overlooked, which again is a critical component. You want buy-in, you want to have that quote unquote authority. It's not about that. It's about building the relationship with the learner. In this case, we're talking about the teacher or even the administrator. So it would be the same process with the administrator.
Yeah. And I think that's very well said. And I think that, we actually have to look at relationships as an accomplishment. Thomas Gilbert would look at it that way. Carl Binder, this is something that you need. Now, if you don't have a relationship with them, if you don't find out what somebody's reinforcer are, if you don't get them in touch with some sort of positive reinforcement, you might win the battle, but you're losing the war. So I would say to Anika's point that you need to keep your behavioral lens on, meaning we need to look at through the 4-term contingency. And we have to think about motivating operations, right? So I think about anybody that's going into support, behavior analysts or anybody, behavior analysts, we have 4 main hats that we have to put on. Sometimes we have to have a training hat, man. That means skill acquisition, right? If somebody doesn't have the skill, we've got to help them develop the skill to be successful, whether it's student, staff, faculty, it doesn't matter. Sometimes we have to put on a coaching hat. That means supporting the transference of learned skills into a natural environment. We got to have something that generalizes. We switch from telling people to asking them, right? What are you doing? How's it impacting your environment? Helping them to observe the naturally occurring consequences of their behavior so we can fade out. Sometimes we have to have on our managing hat, right? And that is leveraging existing contingencies to keep the behavior moving efficiently, effectively. But here's the one that everybody forgets about, going back to Anika's point, is that we've sometimes got to put on a leading hat. These are all behaviors, right? So it doesn't matter what your position is. The leading hat creates a want for people, right? We can think about it in general terms, like we're inspiring people to want to get their behavior moving towards an important goal. And how do you do that? Well, you engage in good question asking. There's research, but spin selling research by Neil Rackham, that they interviewed 35,000 salespeople and found that how do you get them to buy stuff? Well, you get them to buy them by finding out, and I'm just putting this behaviorally, what the reinforcers are, what's blocking their access to reinforcers, uncovering some other things that they didn't think about through good question asking, right? Which has an MO effect. And then saying, what if I was willing to remove those obstacles? Would you be willing to engage in this behavior? There's been approaches that have good research behind them, relatively good research, like motivational interviewing. It's grounded in that, right? Finding out what's important to people and then moving in that direction. So, but you're creating a want through that. So I got to say that when somebody, if it was a kid and he wasn't following the behavior plan, well, they're not following the behavior plan. He's done with that. I'm taking my behavior stuff and going somewhere else. No, man, it doesn't happen. We don't do it that way. So no. Like Anika said, we're approaching it the same way we would approach any learner. And if that learner doesn't want, there's all this talk about assent, and getting people to want to do things, man, we got to do our best to create a want for them. Now, I will say this: if they don't want to, if you can just get people to engage in some behavior and get them in touch with some sort of positive reinforcement, then you're good. You know what I mean? That positive reinforcement is going to take over. We got to get them to behave one way or another. The best way is to inspire them, to create a want for them, right? Use yourself to help them see that if you do these things, you're going to produce these things that are meaningful, these outcomes that are meaningful to you. That makes sense?
Absolutely. So I know we have just a little bit of time left, so I want to take the conversation in a slightly different direction. And you guys have been prolific writers. Paulie, I don't know what number book this is of yours, but I know you've put a bunch out, and that's very impressive. And I've had the opportunity to collaborate on some book projects before, and so I have a bit of an idea of the work that's involved with that. So I guess based off of that, I'm curious about what, and this may be different for either of you, and you can take this any way you like, but what is your writing process? What have you learned about writing through creating all this content? And maybe what advice might you have for someone who has some sort of story or message they want to maybe tell in a book format, but perhaps they don't know where to start?
Well, writing a book is really hard. It really is, and
I think George Orwell has some good quotes about writing. I'm blanking on all of them right now, but they anyway.
Yeah. I think for me, there's always that. I get really excited, and Paulie mentioned this about the teaching aspect of what I put into the book, and and teaching people to do things, and how do I do that, and that's kind of the framework or the lens that I like to look at book writing through. Like, how can I teach somebody to do something? And I think that's my strength. It's definitely not I think I'm best going in that part, but also like going in and like kind of arranging and like figuring out how to put it together, and how it flows. But the writing, that it's definitely a commitment. It is long nights, late nights, weekends. You get ideas. It's note taking. It's collaborating. I mean, Paulie and I were on often about this. It's having to meet those deadlines. And especially when you have 50 million other things going on. But I would say also write about what write about what you're passionate about. I'm very passionate about education and educators and teaching. Very passionate about, just having been, as a consultant, working as a consultant, on the other end, doing that, direct work with learners. I think all of those skills kind of help me, build my practice, my knowledge, my skill set. And that's what I wrote about. I wrote about, the things that, were difficult for me, and, and also, what I did to, learn the skills that I needed to improve. So I think just write about what write about what you're passionate about. Lots of people, you would be surprised, are hungry for this information. And I think it's important to share. So write about what write about what you're passionate about.
Yeah. And I would, a few things to add to that. One is that absolutely, in you want to be solving some problem for somebody. Mm-hmm. And the great thing about the science of human behavior is we can solve a lot of problems, right? I mean, the science doesn't give us all the answers, but it can help us find the best ones, which is awesome. For me, I always like to have like a partner in crime, so to speak, with writing, because I know I don't have all the answers, and giving somebody to bounce stuff off of really helps. And so that really worked for me, and also kind of provide some sort of contingency, but there's somebody else to hold you accountable for writing. Now, when I get stuck on something, I'm like, I can't stop thinking about it, so I'm a different animal like that. I just like,
oh my gosh, are you like, I'm like, what are you doing 2:00 in the morning? Paulie will like have this idea, like he's on vacation. I'm like, could you just be on vacation? Like, stop, right? It will be here when you get back. But your ideas, I know they just like, flow out of your head. I'm like, I'm very different.
Yeah. You have, that's the thing. When you work with somebody else, you have to also know them. And I've worked with quite a few, and, realizing that each of you is going to have your own strengths. So finding, if you're going to if you're going to, well, first of all, if you're going to write, you need to come up with the idea, right? It's got to be something you're passionate about, something that solves some sort of problem for somebody, right? That's very important. I would create an outline first, right? You need to create an outline of what that's going to be. It's got to be logical. I would learn a little bit about storytelling. One of the things that we did in this book that we hadn't done before, and Matt, I actually got to say, this came up with from an idea for you. That's something that we're doing with our behavioral toolbox coursework, is that we have a storyline that we add to this, right? The storyline brings things to life for people.
Yes.
So understand how to tell stories to make things compelling. It's not just about putting science down there. You got to make people want to read it. And you got to make people feel that you understand what it's like to be in their place. That's really important. They need to know you feel their pain, right? So this should be, and you also are aligned with their values. So you begin unpacking it that way. In terms of like having then you set goals up front. Like, you know what, we're going to get done with this chapter by then, right? Figure out in terms of the chapter, the way I do it is like, you know what, this is really your strength. This is your wheelhouse. Why don't you focus on this areas? I'll focus on these areas. By this date, we'll get it up there. Then we'll read each other's and give each other's feedback. So we have a common voice. We agree on it. Then we move on to the next chapter. And you just do that, chapter by chapter is the way that we've done it. Once we've unpacked the whole thing and kind of reverse engineered, our timeline for doing it. And that's kind of what's worked for us. Now, anybody that's going to write a book should know, very transparent about this. I even showed a picture of one of my checks. Matt, I know you can attest to this. Don't write a book because you think you're going to make money off of book sales. Now, I've been writing for years, man. I probably have 200 plus articles out there, non-academic articles. I think I have 5 articles, but I love sharing the science with people. It makes me really happy to help them help themselves and others. But none of my books are bestsellers. This one Anika and I just did is a bestseller. We'll probably get a check for like $50. Right. It's just like, you don't make money, but it feels so good.
So good.
Yeah. To see people say, this is amazing. This is really helping me, and knowing that it's helping other people. And, financially, honestly, it does provide other opportunities. I'm not going to, act like that doesn't happen. People reaching out, they want more support. Can we come out and give training and coaching or keynotes and all these kind of pieces of the puzzle? But it is a labor of love. It's a upfront investment, like Anika said, in your time, your energy, because it's going to take you, from beginning to end. Let's say if you sign on with the publisher, it's going to take you a minimum of a year to put your book out if you want something good, and if you do get with a publisher, know that what you really need with the publisher is good editing.
Yes.
You want somebody that's going to be able to edit it well. If you don't get good editing, you're going to put something out there that is subpar, that's going to reflect on your own brand, and you don't want that.
No.
Those are great.
I think,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to add to it. Paulie had mentioned, it feels really good, when people say that, the book has helped them, the work that we do has helped them. And I would even take it further, when we do go out and we support schools or school districts and, with training and workshops and coaching. And then we get to visit the schools and we get to see our work displayed. We actually see them engaging in, all of the things that we've taught. It is phenomenal. Like that is why you put in all the work. That's why I put in all the work in the late nights, and we do what we do because that is just the best feeling, because that it can help. And we went through the struggles, we went through the process, and we figured out the systems, and we figured out, what's worked, and we're still learning, we come up with new ideas all the time. And so that's the best part, I think, for writing the book and doing the work. And being engaged in it is just those outcomes. It's so amazing to see.
Awesome. And, I would also say that in addition to having, two things, I guess. One is that, just to echo your point, that the reinforcers are there, but they're very diffuse and they're incredibly delayed.
Yes.
but they are large. It's like the marshmallow test on steroids. So,
yeah.
Another thing I want to bring up before we sign off here is, Paul, you mentioned the behavioral toolbox, and this is a project the three of us have been working on for, almost 2 years now, right?
Yes.
It's got to be getting. And rather than me tell the audience about it, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about the Toolbox and what we're trying to accomplish with this project?
Yeah. So go ahead. You want to go or you want me to go?
You can go. I'll jump in.
Well, what we realized through many years of consulting in one way or other, consulting, forget about like being an outside consultant. You be in your school district and be an inside consultant. You can have different roles, but if you're in any school district or school and you are charged with improving behavioral outcomes in one way or another, it can be very, very challenging. And we've noticed for many years that people have been trained well, they've had great plans and this, and that, and the other, but then you go out there and people just aren't doing the things that they should be doing. And what do you do under those conditions? Much like some of the things we talked about today, like, the tough talks and, the quick wins, et cetera. So nobody's ever taught how to consult. Even if you know how to, you understand the science of human behavior, they're still applying in a way. They're still establishing yourself as a reinforcer. They're still getting behavior going so you can get in touch with some sort of reinforcement. So, involving stakeholders, et cetera, et cetera. So we wanted to put something out there that filled that need because people are struggling. It's very difficult to go in there and people think that you are going to change the behavior of the learner. But really, as we zoom out, because all these processes, what's part of the course, this coursework that we're developing, this asynchronous coursework, is that it's really looking at behavioral improvement through an OBM lens. And through that lens, student behavior is a result, right? And to get sustainable student behavior, we really need to look at the performance of the educators and staff in their environment, because we have to have something local that's going to reinforce those changes. And so how do you do that? What's that look like? What do you do when the first time you get a call from somebody that needs help? That's like a critical moment. People aren't aware of that stuff. But a lot of people do what Anika and I did. And Matt, you probably did this as well, where they're like, we have a behavior problem. You just show up to the class, and you sit in the back and you collect data and then you write up a plan and nobody follows the plan and the teacher might not want you back. And, it's very frustrating. And then people are blaming you because the behavior is not changing and they're going to kick the kid out of there. And just all this aversive stuff happens. Understanding how to go into there, how to assess what information is really important, how to engage, who your stakeholders are, how to engage your stakeholders, understanding, how to ask good questions, but, understanding their values, understanding your own values, understanding your own behavior and how it's impacting other. All that stuff's part of the process. So what we want to do, we created a 5-step process for change and for consulting. It's assessing, involving, training, coaching, and evaluating. And think about it as a bucket. So we're going to have courses that address each bucket because, for example, assessing, you got to not only find out, what's going on and why it's going on, but you got to find out what's important to the people. And again, who the stakeholders are, et cetera, and why they're not doing it. Performance diagnostics, for example. Then you have to think about planning, and planning isn't just, it's like a behavior plan, but in a school, right, whether it's a classroom or a school level, you have to think about these interlocking behaviors. To bring out the best in the student, you got to bring out the best in teachers. Bring out the best in teachers, you got to bring out the best in school leaders. So there's all this stuff that goes together. And then you have to engage in good training. Training isn't just about telling, even if you're only writing plans. There still should be some sort of instructional design behind it, right? You need that training to stick. And then you got to make sure that there's some sort of coaching going on to make sure that, hey, even if they know how to engage in the skills, that they're going to be doing that stuff well enough and long enough so that it produces some sort of naturally occurring consequences. So the idea is that we have these multiple courses where people are going to be able to come on and learn how to effectively consult in schools, and not just about what they need to do, but also how they have to shape the environment in a way where people can know what to expect and what not to expect from them, because the expectations, because the name behavior is tied to their name, are almost unmanageable, right? So it's because people don't know better. They think you're going to sprinkle magic behavior dust and things are going to change. Anika, I know you got stuff you want to add.
No, yes, and this project is also very personal to me, as I know it is to Matt and Paulie. But it's very personal to me in terms of the storyline. So there's another storyline here, and and all the mistakes that I made, and as a consultant going in, and as I mentioned earlier, I had on, I was a teacher, classroom teacher, I was a behavior analyst, and but when it came to consulting, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I had no idea. And I often tell the story of how Paul and I, we were working together, and that's how we met in schools. And in the school district. And, we were working together, and one day I showed up at, for coffee, and I put my head down and I ugly cried because I could not manage. I was in a position where I was expected to manage all of the behavior across multiple schools with a very small team, and I had no systems. I had no idea how to do that. And so this project for me was a labor of love, because I'm like, no, they need to know this and they need to know that. And all of this, we have to put all of this in there. And so that's how we kind of spread it out and broke it up. But yes, it's all the things that, we encountered as consultants, as, behavior analysts working in schools. And it's been a fun, I'm excited about, what's to come, all the coursework that we're going to put out, because I know people really want this. And, I coach behavior analysts, in how to consult in schools. And that's been also another joy, just to see their progress and see their outcomes, and all, the positive change that they've been able to make in schools has been amazing. So this to me is like my passion project for sure.
And Matt, this is different, as you well know. I know it's preaching the choir because you're involved in developing it, but this is not like your average. First of all, we don't. It's a course for learning, right? People can get C's from it, but this is different. There's nothing actually in the world like this right now, because nobody's really digging in on how to be consultant, leveraging OBM in schools, and you don't have to be a behavior analyst to learn how to do this, right? We make it very, very practical, but we keep engaging.
I would say, just to jump in here real quick, if we are actually going to be successful and get behavior change on a wider scale, we would hope that, yes, we'd hope certainly behavior analysts, who would benefit from this would participate in the course. But I think creating a significant shift in perspective along these things will require that the majority of people taking these courses are not going to be behavior analysts. They're going to be special educators, school psychologists, assistant principals who are in charge of, the behavior or discipline or whatever in a particular setting. So anyway, just wanted to put that in there.
Well, that's it. What we found, Matt, is that a lot of we've sold many books to school leaders in school districts, which is very exciting, because it's planting these seeds of behavior analysis in these schools, which is wonderful. But it's usually been the wonderful behavior analysts that see the value in it that end up being like our best marketers. They end up being the champions of the science and plugging this stuff into schools. And I think that will probably be the case with these courses, because it'll be like, you guys need this stuff, because everybody could use it, but school leaders as well, especially if they're in a place where there's a lot of behavioral challenges. But one of the things that separates this course from others that are out there, I've seen a lot of courses out there, and they can be boring. They're not professionally filmed or edited. We have all that stuff. We got a great storyline. We have an avatar, Bobby. We use Doodly, to show some cartoons, illustrate some stuff, and we've gotten some good feedback on it, man. In fact, our good friend David Roth, who was on the B.F. Skinner Foundation, the former editor-in-chief of Operance Magazine, just said it was the best resources that he's ever seen for consulting and tools that you can actually use. And it's just the first course. So that was high praise indeed from David. And we're beta testing it right now, but we're about done with the beta test. It's ready to rock and roll. So probably by the time this thing gets published, it'll be ready to go.
Yep.
Anika, harkening back to what you're saying about the mistakes we've all made, one of the things that I think it's important for folks to know, if they go to the behavioraltoolbox.com, we had a fun time putting this together. There's a downloadable that you can get of like the 5 things you shouldn't do as a behavioral consultant when you observe a classroom. So if people want to go see that, it doesn't require buying the course or anything like that. So you can go to the website, and there should be something that pops up that cues you to download that. And hopefully you either get a laugh or resonate with it some way or another. So
just know, we've all made those mistakes, and go by and check us out.
All right. So I will have links to where people can get the book. We'll have links to the Behavioral Toolbox, certainly. And I'll make sure people can find you guys on LinkedIn, where they can read all of Paulie's articles, because that's where he's pretty prolific.
They're all there.
And, we have a Behavioral Toolbox newsletter as well.
Yes, that's right.
LinkedIn. We got to link it to the website at some point.
Yep. We can do that. All right, guys. Congrats with the book. And we'll be seeing you soon.
All right.
Thanks for having us on, brother.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Behavioral Observations Podcast with Matt Sikoria. You can find Matt's notes on this episode at www.behavioralobservations.com. We also invite you to stay connected with us on Facebook at facebook.com/behavioral observations and on Twitter at Behavior Podcast.